The Discourses of Epictetus, a sleepy summary, drift away with Stoic wisdom. Once, a very long time ago, in the warm and dusty lands of the ancient Roman world, there lived a man who had almost nothing in the material sense of the word: no fine house, no wealthy family to speak of, no collection of beautiful things, no soft and cushioned bed. And yet he was considered by many who knew him, and by many thousands more who came after him, to be one of the wisest and most genuinely free people who had ever walked the surface of the earth. His name was Epictetus, and he had been born a slave, not metaphorically a slave, not enslaved in some poetic sense, but actually, literally, legally owned by another person in the way that people owned horses or furniture or plots of land. And yet from this beginning, from this most unpromising and constrained of starting points, he grew into someone whose ideas would outlast every emperor and every empire he ever lived beneath, whose quiet voice would carry across 2,000 years of human confusion and arrive, still patient, still clear, still gently amused by all of us, right here into this room where you are lying down and getting ready to sleep. Tonight, as you settle in and let your breathing find its own slow rhythm, and feel the weight of the day beginning to lift from your shoulders and your chest, and the small tired muscles behind your eyes, we are going to wander very gently through his teachings. We are going to let his voice come to us the way it came to the young men who sat in his modest schoolroom in the Greek city of Nicopolis, not as a demand, not as a test, not as something you must memorize or perform correctly, but simply as company. As the good company of a thoughtful person who has already been through a great deal of difficulty and has come out the other side not bitter or broken but illuminated, in the quiet way that people who have truly understood something are illuminated from the inside steadily without needing anyone else to notice. Epictetus did not write his ideas down himself. He was not a writer in that formal, constructing sense. He was a talker, a teacher, a man who thought best in conversation, who needed the friction and warmth of other minds to bring his ideas into their sharpest and most useful form. He ran his school for many years in Nicopolis, which sat on the northwestern coast of Greece, where the Adriatic Sea came in on the breeze, and the light in the afternoon had that particular golden quality that Mediterranean light has when it falls across old stone and dust. Students traveled great distances to sit with him, young men from wealthy Roman families, sons of senators and knights, people who had grown up with every material advantage and had somehow still managed to feel that something essential was missing from their understanding of how to live. They came to Nicopolis and sat on benches and listened to an old lame former slave explain the universe to them, and many of them went home permanently changed. His student Arian was one of these young men, and he was devoted enough and attentive enough to sit and take careful notes during the lectures, the way you might carefully transcribe something you know you will want to return to later. These notes became the Discourses, 4 surviving books of conversations and teachings that have moved through time like a small, steady lamp carried through a very long corridor of centuries, never going out, occasionally flickering when the world got very dark and confused, but never actually extinguished. The discourses are not polished or formally structured the way a composed philosophical treatise is. They have the texture of real speech, of a real person thinking out loud in the presence of other real people, doubling back, using examples, asking rhetorical questions, sometimes getting a little exasperated, sometimes laughing. They feel alive in a way that more formal philosophy sometimes does not. And the central idea, the seed from which every single thing Epictetus ever taught grew outward like rings in still water, is this: there are some things in life that are up to us, and there are some things that are not up to us. That is the whole philosophy, stated in one sentence. Everything else is elaboration and illustration and application. If you hold on to only this one idea as you drift towards sleep tonight, you will wake in the morning with something genuinely valuable resting quietly in your mind, and it will be there waiting for you the way a good thought sometimes waits, patiently, without demanding immediate action, simply present and available when you need it. What is up to us? Epictetus is very precise about this, because precision is where the comfort lives. What is up to us is our opinions about things. Our desires, what we move toward, our aversions, what we move away from, the impulse to act and the action itself, the way we respond to whatever happens, the judgments we make, the values we hold, the narrative we tell ourselves about our own life, the effort we bring to any given moment. These things belong to us in a way that is absolute and inalienable. No external force can reach inside and rearrange them without our participation. They are ours the way our breath is ours, not permanently, not forever, but genuinely and completely in this moment. What is not up to us? The body we were born into and everything that happens to it, the family we came from, the wealth or poverty we find ourselves in, the opinion other people hold of us, however much we may wish we could control it, whether we are praised or scorned, loved or neglected, promoted or overlooked, the behavior of other people, the stability of the government, the reliability of the harvest, the length of our lives, the specific combination of circumstances that constitutes the world we were dropped into without being consulted. All of this, all of the vast, complicated, beautiful, terrible furniture of external existence is not up to us. We may have preferences about it. We may have some influence over small corners of it, but we do not own it. We do not control it. And our suffering, says Epictetus, comes almost entirely from forgetting this. We suffer because we treat the things that are not up to us as though they were. We act as though our reputation were as much ours to control as our honesty is. We behave as though the outcome of our efforts were as much ours to determine as the quality of the effort itself. We fret about what other people think of us, and in doing so give other people a power over our inner peace that they were never supposed to have and do not, in truth, actually possess. We treat temporary loans from fortune as though they were permanent possessions, and then feel robbed when fortune recalls them. And all of this straining and grasping and fretting, exhausts us and diminishes us and keeps us at a perpetual low-level hum of anxiety that we have come to accept as simply the normal condition of being alive, when in fact it is not normal at all. It is a mistake, a correctable one. Let your body sink a little further now. Notice the surface beneath you, how solid it is, how it holds you without any effort on your part. You do not have to do anything to be held. The support is simply there. Epictetus would find this an excellent illustration. So much of what sustains us is simply there, beneath and around us, asking nothing in return. He himself had learned this lesson in the most unambiguous possible way. As a slave, he had nothing. His body was not his own in any legal sense. His labor was not his own. His time was not his own. His location was not his own. Everything that most people mean when they say my life, all of it had been taken from him by the simple fact of his birth into slavery. And yet, in the space that remained, the small interior space of how he thought, how he responded, what he valued, what he refused to abandon regardless of circumstance, he found something inexhaustible. He found something that could not be confiscated because it had no physical form. He found the prohaises. The prohaises is a Greek word that does not translate cleanly into English, which is part of why philosophers have left it in Greek. It means something like the power of choice, or the will, or the rational faculty, or the seat of decision. But it means all of those things together, woven into a single concept. It is the part of you that decides. Not the part of you that wants things or fears things. Those are downstream of the prohaises and can be trained and shaped by it. The prohaises is the part that is upstream of all of that. It is the watcher, the chooser, the inner author of your responses to the world. Epictetus believed that this faculty, this inner choosing self, was the most divine thing about a human being. The Stoics in general believed that the universe was organized by a rational principle they called the logos, a kind of cosmic reason that moved through everything and gave everything its structure and direction. And they believed that this same logos was present inside every human being as reason, as the capacity to think clearly and choose well. When you use your reason honestly, when you examine your judgments, when you question your assumptions, when you choose a harder right over an easier wrong, you are, in a sense, aligning yourself with the deepest grain of the universe. You are doing what you were made to do. You are, as Epictetus might put it, playing your part well in the grand drama that is being performed all around you, whether you participate consciously or not. He uses the image of an actor, and it is an image worth holding in the soft light of your closing eyes. You have been given a role. Maybe the role is wealthy, maybe it is poor, maybe it is healthy and long, maybe it is brief and difficult. Maybe you play a powerful person in the drama of your era, or maybe you play someone who passes through almost unnoticed. The role itself is not your choice. The playwright determines that. But the quality of your performance is entirely yours. You can play even the smallest role with full presence, with integrity, with genuine craft. Or you can play even the grandest role carelessly, half-heartedly, distracted by resentment that you were not given a different part. The audience, by which Epictetus means something like the rational order of the universe, cares not about the size of the role, but about the sincerity and quality of the playing. And when the play is over, and you must set the costume down, when illness takes the body, or age closes in, or fortune turns, or simply the particular scene you have been inhabiting comes to its natural end, the good actor does not weep at having to remove the costume. The costume was always the costume. The actor was always something else, something that the costume neither created nor destroyed. The first book of the Discourses covers a great deal of ground, but it keeps circling back to this fundamental distinction. What is mine? What is not mine? The way a river circles an island without ever quite leaving it. And one of the most important places this distinction touches is the territory of desire and fear. Most of us live in a kind of perpetual negotiation between the two, wanting things we do not have, fearing things we might lose or might have to face. Both of these states are directed outward, toward the world of things that are not up to us. And both of them, for that reason, set us up for suffering. We desire what fortune may or may not provide. We fear what fortune may or may not take. And since fortune is not in our hands, we live in permanent insecurity, permanently dependent on the generosity of something that has no particular interest in being generous. His prescription is not that we should desire nothing and fear nothing. The prescription of a hollow, drained, empty person would not be his prescription. He cares. He cares enormously about certain things, but he has trained his caring to flow in a direction where it can actually find purchase. He desires virtue, the quality of his own character, the integrity of his choices, the depth of his understanding. He fears vice, acting badly, betraying his principles, becoming the kind of person who cannot look at himself honestly. These are things that are genuinely within his influence. When he desires them and works toward them, the effort is not wasted. The territory responds to his labor. He is not pushing at a locked door. He has a wonderful way of framing this that makes it almost feel like relief rather than discipline. He says, "Aim your will only at what is within your will." It sounds circular until you sit with it for a moment and realize that it is actually the most practical advice imaginable. We are so accustomed to aiming our will outward, at the behavior of other people, at the outcomes of our plans, at the general state of the world, and being disappointed when the world does not comply. We exhaust ourselves in this way. We spend enormous reserves of energy on a negotiation that was always going to go against us. What Epictetus is suggesting is not defeat. He is not saying give up on the world. He is saying aim at the right target, the target that will not move when you are not looking, the target that is actually there every single time you raise your gaze to it. Breathe out. The room is quiet. You are not required to solve anything tonight. Nothing is being asked of you right now except this, to let the day go, to let your mind loosen its grip on tomorrow, to rest. Epictetus would say this is itself a practice, the practice of not grasping, the practice of allowing the moment to be what it is without needing it to be different. Even sleep is a kind of surrender, and surrender, when it is conscious and chosen, is a form of wisdom. In the second book, his attention turns toward the texture of daily life, and especially toward the complicated business of living alongside other people. And here, the philosophy becomes particularly warm and human, because Epictetus is not a person who believes in withdrawal. He is not a hermit. He lived in community, taught in community, cared about his students and his neighbors and the wider human family with genuine tenderness. The Stoics believed that human beings were social creatures by nature, that we were not made for solitude, but for relationship, for the give and take of a life lived among others. And this conviction runs all through the discourses, but living among others is not simple. Other people are unpredictable. They say things that hurt. They behave in ways that disappoint. They fail to understand us. They misrepresent us. They occasionally treat us with cruelty that feels entirely undeserved. How do we navigate all of this without being constantly destabilized by it? Epictetus has a thought about this that takes a moment to land, but when it does land, it is quite profound. He says, when someone insults you or wrongs you or treats you with contempt, ask yourself what exactly is causing the pain. Is it their behavior itself? Or is it your judgment about their behavior? The words another person speaks are just vibrations in the air. They have no direct access to your inner world. They enter through your ears and then pass through the filter of your own interpretation, your own assessment of what they mean, what they imply, how seriously to take them. It is that assessment, that inner judgment, that actually causes the hurt. And assessments, unlike other people's behavior, are within your domain. This is not a call to numb yourself or to pretend that unkindness does not sting. Of course it stings. Bodies and hearts feel things, and there is no philosophy that erases sensation. But there is a difference between the first sting, which is largely automatic and physical, a kind of involuntary flinch, and the sustained suffering that follows, the rumination and the resentment and the wound that reopens every time you revisit it. That sustained suffering lives in the judgment. In the story you tell yourself about what happened and what it means, and that story is yours to revise. He also speaks, with a dry and affectionate humor, about people who are constantly offended. People who take every slight as a profound injustice, who replay criticisms endlessly, who require constant reassurance that they are valued and respected, who become dramatically unhappy when the world fails to arrange itself in acknowledgement of their importance. He understands these people. He has no contempt for them, but he also sees very clearly what has happened to them. They have handed the keys to their emotional life to anyone who happens to walk by. Every passerby can make a deposit or a withdrawal in the account of their well-being. Every opinion of every person has the power to alter the landscape of their inner life. This is not freedom. This is the most complete and comprehensive form of enslavement, to be the prisoner not of one master, but of every opinion that has ever been expressed in your vicinity. The alternative, the truly free life, is to be unmoved not through coldness, but through centeredness. To have a fixed point inside yourself that does not relocate based on what other people say. To know your own quality so clearly and honestly that external assessments, positive or negative, become interesting data rather than verdicts. Praise is pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism is worth examining. Sometimes it is accurate, in which case thank them and correct yourself, and sometimes it is not, in which case let it pass like weather. You are not obligated to absorb every comment directed at you as though it were truth. In the second book, 2, Epictetus talks about the people we love, and here his voice drops into something particularly gentle and precise and true. He knows, he has always known, that the people we love are the greatest source of both our deepest joy and our sharpest pain. When we love someone, we make ourselves vulnerable in a way that no amount of philosophical training can entirely protect against, and Epictetus does not pretend otherwise. He does not say, do not love because love hurts. He says, love, but love with open eyes and open hands. The famous exercise he gives his students is one that sounds cold until you actually do it, at which point it becomes something quite different. He says, when you hold your child, when you embrace your friend, when you sit with someone dear to you, hold in your mind at the same time the awareness that this person is mortal. This person will change. This person may leave through death or distance or the natural drift of lives moving in different directions. Not as a morbid preoccupation, not as a way of poisoning the present moment with anticipatory grief, but as a way of making the present moment vivid and real and undeferred. The person who lives as though their loved ones will be around forever tends to take them for granted. The person who carries the awareness of mortality lightly alongside the love tends to actually see the people they love, to actually be present with them, to actually savor the cup while it is still full. He says, think of it the way you think about a borrowed thing. If someone lends you a beautiful cup, you enjoy it fully while you have it, but you do not weep when they ask for it back, because it was always theirs, always alone. The people in your life were never unconditionally yours. They came into your life through the generosity of existence, and they will leave it the same way. The grief, when they go, is real and right and human. But the grief that comes from treating them as permanent possessions, the grief of having been robbed of something you were owed, that grief has a quality of mistake in it. It hurts in a way that does not have to hurt that hard. This is not hardness. It is the opposite of hardness. It is a way of loving more fully, not less. The parent who knows their child will one day grow and leave tends to be more present in the years of closeness than the parent who assumes the closeness is permanent and can always be appreciated later. The friend who knows friendship is not guaranteed tends to show up more genuinely than the friend who takes the friendship as a given. Epictetus is not asking you to love less. He is asking you to love more with more presence, more gratitude, more clear-eyed tenderness for the temporary and irreplaceable thing that you have right now in this moment before anything changes. Your eyes are heavy now. The pillow is soft and reliable beneath your head. The darkness behind your eyelids has that particular quality it gets when sleep is close, soft, and dimensional, like fabric. Everything is fine. Everything you need is already here. In the third book, Epictetus becomes somewhat more specific about the practice, about what it actually looks like to live this philosophy in the ordinary day-to-day conditions of an actual human life. And one of the things he is most interested in here is the concept of progress. Not dramatic, visible, publicly acknowledged progress. Not the kind of progress that makes a good story at a dinner party. The quiet, interior, nearly invisible kind of progress that happens in the gap between stimulus and response, in the half-second before you say something you would later regret, in the choice to keep a commitment when breaking it would have been easier. He is suspicious of people who wear their philosophy loudly. He says this with a gentle but genuine sharpness. The student who comes to class learns about the Stoics and then goes home and lectures his family about how they should be living. That student has entirely missed the point. The philosophy is not a new subject of conversation. It is a new quality of action. It is not something you say. It is something you do, or rather something you are, increasingly and imperfectly over time. If you have truly begun to understand Epictetus, he suggests, the first sign will not be that you start talking differently. The first sign will be that you start listening better. You will become quieter, more patient, less anxious to establish your own position in every room you enter. You will find that you have less urgent need to be right, because being right was always downstream of the desire for recognition, and the desire for recognition was always downstream of the fear that you were not sufficient on your own. And as that fear loosens, the need to be right loosens with it. You can simply be in a conversation, genuinely curious about what the other person thinks, without needing it to end in your favor. This is, he admits, a long process. Progress in philosophy is not like learning to play an instrument, where the improvement is audible and measurable and you can point to it. Progress in philosophy is internal and slow and often invisible even to yourself. There will be days when you think you have understood something deeply, and then a minor inconvenience, a traffic delay, a thoughtless comment, a plan falling through will reveal that the understanding was shallower than you believed. This is not failure. This is information. This is the practice telling you where it still has work to do. He uses the image of an athlete. An athlete who is training does not expect to be at their peak on the first day. They expect soreness. They expect setbacks. They expect the process to be longer and harder than they initially imagined. And yet they do not stop training because of this, quite the opposite. The difficulty is the point. The resistance is where the growth happens. In exactly the same way, the person training in philosophy should expect to be tested, should expect to fall short, should expect that the circumstances of life will regularly present situations harder than they currently have the resources to handle perfectly. And each of those situations is an opportunity. A real, gritty, uncomfortable opportunity to practice the thing they have been studying in the relatively safe environment of the schoolroom. He particularly emphasizes that the practice happens in relationship, with the difficult colleague, with the demanding parent, with the friend who keeps making the same mistake you have advised them against 17 times, with the stranger who is rude to you for no discernible reason. The schoolroom is where you learn the ideas. The world is where you actually practice them. And you cannot practice them anywhere except in the actual conditions of your actual life, which means the difficult people and the frustrating situations and the plans that fail and the days that go wrong from the very first hour are not interruptions to your philosophical training. They are your philosophical training. Somewhere in the third book, Epictetus also talks about role and duty in a way that is easy to misread as rigid or moralistic, but is actually quite warm and flexible once you understand what he is getting at. He says that each of us occupies multiple roles simultaneously. You are someone's child, perhaps someone's parent, perhaps a spouse or sibling or friend or colleague or citizen or neighbor or any number of other relational positions at once. And each of these roles carries with it natural obligations, not rules imposed from outside, not arbitrary demands you must comply with or be punished, but genuine extensions of what you are in relation to another person. The Stoics believed, with great consistency and seriousness, that human beings were made for connection, that the rational faculty we each possess is not a private and isolating thing, but a shared thing, a thread that runs through every human being and connects us to one another in a network of mutual obligation and mutual care. When Epictetus says that you have duties as a parent or a friend or a citizen, he is not lecturing you. He is describing the shape of a fully human life. A life that turns only inward, that recognizes no obligations to others, that takes without giving and withholds without care. That life is not a philosophical life. It is a stunted one. It has misunderstood what the philosophy is for. The goal is not to become invulnerable. It is not to become indifferent. It is not to achieve a state of perfectly smooth isolation from the world's texture and demand. The goal is to engage with the world fully and freely, with your whole self, without the distortion that comes from need, without needing other people's approval, without needing events to go a certain way, without needing the universe to owe you anything. From that place of not needing, you can actually give. You can actually care. You can actually show up for the people who need you without the complicated and exhausting agenda of your own anxiety running underneath every interaction. He talks about how to handle it when people we care about behave badly, when friends disappoint us, when family members do things we find painful or wrong. His advice is steady and unsentimental in the best possible way. Maintain your own integrity regardless of theirs. You cannot control how others behave. You can only control how you respond. This does not mean you accept mistreatment with a pleasant smile. You are allowed to set limits, to withdraw from harmful situations, to be honest about what you will and will not participate in. But do all of this from your own centered sense of what is right, not from a reactive place of hurt and retaliation. The person who responds to cruelty with cruelty has allowed the other person to make them smaller. The person who responds to cruelty with clarity and dignity has remained themselves, has refused the invitation to become diminished. The night is very deep now. Your breathing is slow and steady, moving in and out like the tide moving in and out on a shore somewhere, rhythmic and patient, and completely unconcerned with being anything other than what it is. That is exactly right. That is exactly the quality Epictetus is pointing at, the quality of a thing being fully and simply itself, without apology and without performance. There is a passage in the third book where he talks about how we present ourselves in the world, about vanity and the desire to appear a certain way to others. He is not harsh about this. He understands the impulse completely. Of course, we want to be seen in a favorable light. Of course, we prefer admiration to contempt. These are natural human preferences, but he asks us to notice how much energy we spend managing our appearance, not just our physical appearance, but our social and reputational appearance, the image of ourselves that we project into other people's minds. We perform versions of ourselves in different rooms with different audiences. We emphasize certain qualities and conceal others. We position ourselves carefully. We calibrate what we say based on who is listening. And all of this, he suggests, is expensive, not in money, but in the deeper currency of attention and energy that a life runs on. The performance is tiring. The maintenance of the image requires constant monitoring, and there is always the anxiety underneath. What if they see through it? What if the image slips? What if someone says something that does not match the picture I have worked so hard to create? This is the anxiety of the person who has outsourced their sense of value to the opinion of others, and it is, in its way, a form of poverty. A person who needs the world to see them in a particular way is as dependent as a person who needs money from a particular source. The dependency itself is the vulnerability. The free alternative, and it really is freer, he insists, even though it sounds more exposed, is simply to be what you actually are, to have one face rather than several, to behave with the same integrity in private as you do in public, when no one is watching as when everyone is watching. Not because you are performing integrity for an invisible audience, but because integrity, when it is genuine, does not distinguish between audiences. It is just how you are. It is as natural and unconsidered as breathing. And the person who has arrived at this, who no longer needs to manage their image, because their image and their reality have become the same thing, that person has achieved a kind of rest that the image manager will never know. The performance is over. You can simply be. The fourth and final book of the Discourses opens with what is arguably the most important and most radical of all Epictetus's ideas, and it is this: the only truly free person is the person who wants only what is in their power to have, and he is prepared to argue at length and with great precision that he, a man who was owned as property for a significant portion of his life, was freer than most of the supposedly free men he ever met. Let that settle in the soft space of your half-sleeping mind. A slave freer than senators, a poor man richer than the wealthy, the person who seems to have nothing, possessing the one thing that actually matters. This is not paradox for its own sake. It is not a trick or a riddle. It is the conclusion of a very honest examination of what freedom actually means, what it actually consists of when you strip away all the conventional associations and look at the thing itself. Freedom, he says, is not the absence of external constraint. If that were what freedom meant, then everyone who had ever been imprisoned was unfree, and everyone who lived outside a prison was free. But we know from our own experience that this is not quite right. We have felt unfree in rooms with no locked doors, trapped by our own anxiety or resentment or compulsion. We have felt oddly free in the middle of great difficulty, when the situation was so clear and the choices so obvious that the confusion fell away and we simply knew what to do and did it. Freedom is an interior condition. It is the condition of a person who acts from their own deepest understanding rather than from fear or compulsion or the need for others' approval. The tyrant, says Epictetus, has power over your body. He can throw you in prison. He can take your property. He can, in the extreme case, end your life. But he cannot make you think something you do not think. He cannot make you value something you do not value. He cannot enter the inner room of your judgment and rearrange the furniture. If you value your integrity more than your comfort, if you have made the fundamental decision that what matters to you is who you are, not what you have, then the tyrant has no leverage over you at all. What would he threaten you with? You have already decided that the things he could take are not the things you depend on. This is not a small idea. This is one of the most radical ideas in the entire history of human thought. It says that power, real power, the power that actually determines the quality of a life, is interior. It says that the person in the palace and the person in the prison are not automatically who you think they are in terms of freedom. It says that the whole apparatus of coercion and punishment that political power runs on is, at its root, dependent on the cooperation of the people it is trying to coerce, dependent on their agreement that the things being threatened are in fact the things that matter most. And a person who withdraws that agreement, who has genuinely reorganized their values around what is truly their own, has made themselves immune in the deepest possible sense. He tells a story about a student who is worried about what will happen if he angers Caesar. What if Caesar banishes him? What if Caesar has him executed? And Epictetus listens patiently and then says, essentially, let's go through this carefully. If Caesar banishes you, you will go somewhere else. Other places exist. There is air there too, there is sky. If Caesar takes your property, you will have less property. Is the quality of your judgment inside your property? Is your integrity stored in your house? If Caesar takes your life, and here he pauses, not dramatically but with genuine calm, well, he was always going to take it. Caesar or no Caesar, the life was always going to end. What you did with it while you had it is the only question that was ever actually on the table. There is a long and beautiful section of the fourth book where Epictetus talks about what it means to live well in the practical sense, not in the grand philosophical sense, but in the daily domestic ordinary sense. What does a Stoic morning look like? What does a Stoic day feel like from the inside? And the answer is, perhaps surprisingly, quite warm and quiet. It looks like paying attention. It looks like doing what is in front of you with full presence. It looks like not borrowing trouble from tomorrow. It looks like handling the irritations of today without letting them accumulate into a grievance that poisons the evening. He talks about what he calls keeping your prohaises in good condition, and by this he means something like tending the inner life the way you would tend a garden. A garden left untended does not stay as it was, it changes. Things grow in it that you did not plant. The shape drifts away from what you intended. The inner life is the same. Left untended, it accumulates noise and distortion and confusion. It begins to reflect the environment around it rather than the values inside it. The person who does not regularly examine their own thoughts and judgments and choices tends to drift, slowly and without noticing, into patterns of reactivity and assumption and unexamined habit. The practice is the examination. The practice is the returning, every day, often quietly. He is not prescribing a dramatic daily ritual. He is not saying you must spend 3 hours in philosophical contemplation before breakfast. He is suggesting something much more modest and much more penetrating. Simply notice. Notice when you are about to react and pause. Notice when you are making an assumption and question it. Notice when you feel destabilized by something external and ask yourself honestly whether the thing that destabilized you was actually in the category of things you are supposed to care about. This constant, gentle, low-key noticing is the practice. It is not glamorous. It produces no impressive performance. It makes no good story, but it changes, slowly and deeply, the quality of the interior life, and the interior life is the whole of life in the sense that matters. He also speaks, in the fourth book, about the approach of death, not with any morbidity, but with the same practical clarity he brings to everything else. The Stoics in general thought about death a great deal, not because they were gloomy people, but because they understood that a life lived without an honest acknowledgement of its ending was a life partially in denial. And denial, however comfortable in the short term, produces a kind of brittleness that the world will eventually shatter. The person who has never seriously contemplated their own death tends to be disproportionately destroyed when death comes close to them, in illness, in the loss of people they love, in the realization that their own time is shorter than they had assumed. The person who has thought about death honestly and often tends to meet it with more steadiness. Not because thinking about death makes it less terrible, but because familiarity reduces the element of surprise, and it is often the surprise, the sudden collision with a reality we had pretended would not come, that does the most damage. Epictetus says, in his quiet and matter-of-fact way, that death is simply the return of what was borrowed. The body was given to you for a time. Your particular arrangement of circumstances was given to you for a time. The people you love were given to you for a time. Nothing was permanent. Nothing was ever intended to be permanent. The universe lends generously and recalls the loans eventually, and the only possible response that does not produce unnecessary suffering is to receive the loans with gratitude and release them with grace when the time comes. Not without grief. Grief is honest and human and appropriate when loss arrives, but without the added layer of suffering that comes from feeling robbed, from feeling that something owed to you has been taken. Near the end of the fourth book, after all the lectures and all the examples and all the patient and sometimes exasperated and sometimes gently funny conversations with students who kept almost understanding and then losing the thread again, Epictetus returns to the beginning. He always returns to the beginning. It is not that he has run out of new things to say. It is that the beginning is inexhaustibly deep. The beginning, what is up to us and what is not a simple thing that you understand once and then move past. It is a thing you understand at one depth and then, when life gives you a new difficulty or a new loss or a new confusion, you discover that the understanding had only reached partway down and there is more beneath it, and you have to go deeper. The distinction sounds easy when nothing much is at stake. When your circumstances are comfortable, and your relationships are going well, and your body feels fine and the world is behaving reasonably, it is not difficult to say, I will not be disturbed by things outside my control. The difficulty arrives when the things outside your control are very large and very close and very real, when the loss is genuine, when the diagnosis is serious, when the relationship ends or the career collapses or the person you needed to be there simply is not. These are the moments when the philosophy is tested, and these are the moments when Epictetus's voice, patient and clear, and warmed by his own genuine experience of hardship, is most worth having in your ear. He does not promise that applying this philosophy will make the hard things easy. He does not promise a pain-free life. He promises something much more modest and much more real, that within the pain, within the difficulty, within the loss, there is still something that cannot be taken from you, and that knowing this, truly knowing it, not just as an intellectual position, but as a felt and lived reality, makes the hard things survivable in a way that they would not otherwise be. The grief does not disappear. The loss does not become smaller, but you remain. The inner life remains. The capacity to choose well, even here, even now, even in this, that remains. And that, he says with the quiet certainty of a person who has verified it in the most difficult conditions, is enough. It has always been enough. The schoolroom in Nicopolis would have been cool in the evenings. The sea air came in off the Adriatic, carrying the smell of salt and distance. The students sat on their benches, some of them very young and still a little confused about why they had traveled so far to listen to this old man with his hobbling walk and his modest house and his clay lamp. Some of them would eventually understand. Some of them would carry these ideas back to Rome and Alexandria and the far corners of the empire and live by them in conditions Epictetus never saw. And some of them would go home and gradually forget, pulled back into the comfortable habits of confusion and distraction that the world makes so easy and so available. This is not a reproach. Epictetus understood this. He had seen it happen many times. Philosophy is not a vaccination against difficulty. It is a practice, like a physical practice, that must be maintained or it fades. The muscle memory goes. The habits reassert themselves. This is simply the human condition, and Epictetus greeted the human condition with a steady and affectionate honesty that never tipped into either sentimentality or despair. People are what they are. They improve slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks. The practice is long, but the practice is available always at any moment in any condition. You can always begin again. The door to the schoolroom, in a sense, is never locked. The lamp on Epictetus's table is burning low now. The room is warm, and the light is amber, and the sound from outside, the sea, the wind in the trees, the distant sound of the town settling into night, is the kind of sound that has no urgency in it. The old philosopher is tired in the good way that follows a day of genuine work. He has said what he had to say. The students have gone. Tomorrow there will be more students, more questions, more confusion to meet with patience, more moments when something suddenly clicks in a young face and the confusion lifts, and for one clear second the truth shines through undistorted. These moments are worth everything. These moments are why he does what he does. He does not go to sleep with ambition or with anxiety. He does not review the day's lecture for errors, does not worry about tomorrow's questions, does not calculate his reputation or his influence or what will be thought of him. He simply lies down because the body needs rest, and rest is a good thing, and a wise person does not resist good things out of some misguided notion that virtue requires suffering. He has done what he could do today. Tomorrow will ask only the same. This is not a burden. This is a structure. This is the shape of a life that is actually livable, not perfect, not grand, not recorded in permanent stone, but genuine and present and enough. And now here you are, in your own quiet room, in your own time which is so distant from his, and yet somehow not distant at all, because the inside of a human mind is the same size it has always been, and the questions it asks are the same questions they have always been, and the peace it can discover is the same peace it has always been able to discover when it finally stops fighting and simply rests. What is yours is yours. What is not yours was never yours, and you were never supposed to carry it, and you can put it down right now, here, tonight, and it will wait for you or it won't, and either way you will wake in the morning with yourself intact, with the inner life still present and available and full of the same steady light it always had. Let the thoughts slow. Let them lose their urgency. They will still be there tomorrow, those thoughts, the practical ones, the planning ones, the worried ones, and tomorrow is a better time for them than now. Now is for this, the simple and remarkable fact of being a living creature at rest in the dark, breathing in and breathing out, held by the surface beneath you, surrounded by the quiet, neither needing anything to change nor needing anything to stay the same. Just here, just this. Just the present moment being what it is, and you being what you are inside it, and nothing in the whole vast arrangement of the universe requiring anything more from you right now than exactly this. Epictetus would smile at this. He would recognize it. He would say, yes, that is it. You have found it without looking. That stillness, that sufficiency, that sense that the present moment is exactly and completely the present moment, and that is enough. That is what he was always pointing at. Not some distant achievement, not some future state of enlightened calm to be attained after years of difficult work. This, right now, the ordinary miracle of a person at rest in themselves, needing nothing, carrying nothing, simply being. Everything you need is already here. Everything you are is already enough. The practice will continue tomorrow, imperfectly and humanly, and with setbacks, as it always has. But tonight there is only sleep, the oldest and most democratic of freedoms, the one that comes to the slave and the emperor alike, the one that empties every mind of its content and returns it, clean and quiet, to the morning. Let it come, you have earned it. The day has been lived. The night is yours, sleep well. The rest can wait until morning.